Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, October 15th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Beverage of choice today, just water. Today, we'll be talking about the ever persistent question. This question I get all the time. People are always wondering, people are always asking. And the question is, what do we do now? And really, this is in reference to people who are starting to feel left out, right? This is where FOMO is starting to kick in. People realize that, man, I had a chance to buy something, yesterday and I didn't buy it. And now the price gone up. The price has gone up. The price is through the roof now. I can't buy that thing anymore. So what do we do? Right? Like, people ask this, people are always wondering, right? Well, what do we do now? People maybe just new getting in. People are already starting to see returns on some of their recent acquisitions, right? Some people who've been in this for a little while, maybe this is their opportunity. Well, maybe I want to get out of it. Maybe I saw the returns that I wanted. Or maybe it's something as simple as I just don't have time to spend with my Magic cards, my Pokemon cards anymore. I want to get out. What now? So today, that's largely going to be the premise of what we're talking about. That's really going to be kind of at the core, at the focus. It's going to be the kind of the question that we always have to be thinking about in the context of kind of today. Some of the topics we'll be talking about, most of the topics will ultimately relate back to this core question: what do we do now? As kind of a general disclaimer, I say this a lot. If you're looking for professional financial advice, I'm not the person to offer that. I'm just offering things that make sense to me, things that have worked for me, my experiences, in terms of, things that have paid off for me, what I've done right. I'm entirely transparent. I've definitely talked about things I've done wrong before. That's really the nature of investing. That's the nature of a volatile market. Is sometimes you get to ride the highs. It feels good when you have something that pays off in massive dividends and it really comes through, and sometimes you have to take an L on what you're buying, and that's just kind of the reality of it. If there's no risk, we'd probably have a lot more people doing this. And if we had a lot more people doing this, it wouldn't be as lucrative as it is. So today, again, as we're talking, as you're listening through, always remember we're going to be thinking back to what do we do now. That is really the core of today's topic. It's the core of all these ideas, concept that we're bringing up. So when you're listening, think about that. Think about what you can be doing now that makes sense to you, that will affect what you do going forward. It's no surprise. I've said this in multiple videos. I've said this time and time again. Collectibles are not showing any signs of slowing down. Now it feels like it's even getting faster and faster than it was before. Prior to the beginning of the pandemic, we saw movement that would happen in months, in years, and now, during the pandemic, movement started happening over the course of weeks, and now we're talking about movements that happen over the courses of days. That's how quick things are changing. That's how quickly the market is adapting. That's how quickly the market is reacting. The people of money, the people who are wanting to put their money into this, who are trying to put down a lot of money, this is really advantageous for them because things are changing very quickly. Things are very dynamic, which is healthy for a market. It's unstable, it's uncertain. We don't really know what's going to happen going forward, but the fact that it's so dynamic, the fact that there's so much activity, there's a lot of people watching this, a lot of people are aware of what's going on. It's really making this market really where you want to be right now. And when you're asking the question, what do we do now? You always have to be thinking about the future. The only difference between now and a few months ago is the future very well could be happening tomorrow. We don't need to be looking at things about holding on to something that you buy and thinking about, man, what is this card? What is this card? What is this sealed box? What is this collection? What is it going to do in a year from now or 2 years from now? We're talking about what could this card potentially do tomorrow. And again, that's just nature of there's more eyes, there's more people looking at the market, there's more people going through this with a fine-tooth comb. People are looking at different things that they haven't had before. The market is really reacting. It's becoming, again, very dynamic in the sense that things are changing very rapidly. You have a lot more people entering the market, a lot more people looking to get in, a lot more people wanting to get a piece of the action. And that's really causing this to speed up and accelerate what happens in the market. And a lot of this, right, you have a lot more mainstream awareness. A few days ago, we talked about how the rapper Logic, he had spent $220,000 on the first edition Charizard. That's mainstream worthy news. We think about it and we think like, man, that's something like it's the concept of it may be something that only are intimately familiar to maybe Pokemon players, for example. But for your average person who's listening to this news, maybe they don't necessarily care. But I'm willing to say that your average person, probably there's no one in the world under the age of like 50 at this point that probably doesn't know what Pokemon is, at least has heard of Pokemon. And you don't need to be a genius. You don't need to have an intimate understanding of Pokemon to understand that you have a rapper. Most people have heard of Logic, right? These people, right? You've heard of Logic, right? He's worth a lot of money, right? So we've heard of him, and this guy is spending $220,000. Like, is this necessarily newsworthy? Not really. I mean, you have wealthy people go spend all sorts of money on like weird eccentric things all the time, right? People spend thousands of dollars getting haircuts, or people, what have you. People spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on cars, right? So like, why is this necessarily newsworthy? And it's newsworthy because you have something that is relatively mundane that shouldn't be worth that much. That is, and you have someone who is worth a lot of money, willing to put a lot of money on things. When you hear about a celebrity buying a sports car, right? Like, is this something that's newsworthy? Absolutely not, right? Like, sports cars are inherently expensive. We know that they're a lot of money, right? But now we're talking about someone who's spending the same amount of money that would cost you to probably buy a small home in the Midwest, depending on where you live, spending the same amount of money as a home, like probably a small, small family size home. You're not getting like a home in the suburbs in an urban area, but right, like $220,000 is no small amount of money to a lot of people, especially in the current state. And now they're spending that much money on a piece of cardboard, right? That really goes to show how much that the stuff is becoming mainstream. A lot more people are becoming aware of it. It's no longer becoming kind of that weird thing that people are doing. I've said this time and time before. Collectibles, games, toys, they've really transitioned away from that. And now people are starting to look at a lot of these things that they experienced at one point in their life as a kid, what have you, that they felt like they grew out of, and now nostalgia is kicking in and they're wanting to go back to enjoy those things that they maybe couldn't afford as a kid, that they just didn't have access to. And now all this nostalgia is really coming back. So now we have more people. They're starting to learn more about collectibles. A lot of people are starting to rediscover their old stuff. Their new old stuff, I guess. It's new to them, but it's something that they've had for a while that they've forgot about. You hear about like all these things that are coming out of the woodworks, they're coming out of the attics, coming out of storage units, right? People left for college. A lot of this stuff got stored away, and now people are going through and reopening, trying to rediscover what they've had. And again, all this stuff entering the market, all this new activity, all this new action entering the market for all these things, right? Not just Pokemon, right? We're talking about magics, collectibles, comics, just kind of the whole spectrum of collectibles as a whole is doing wonders for the market. It's simple. It's simply a matter of, as I've said time and time before, there's more eyes on it. There's more people looking in. People are putting more money into the market. The market cap on these is going up and up and up. Right, this is a good thing for us as collectors, as investors, as players. No matter what vested interest you have, this is a good thing overall. When these companies are doing well, when Pokemon is doing well, when Konami is doing well, when Wizards of the Coast is doing well, when the sports cards companies, Panini, Topps, right, when Becca is doing well, when PSA is doing well, when CGC is doing well, this is a good thing overall for the market. A lot of people people are starting to feel like they're left out, right? You have collectors who have been in this for a long time. People who love Pokemon, they've been in this for a while. You have comic book collectors who've been doing this for a long time. They're starting to feel left out because they're starting to feel like these things, these grails, these cards that I've wanted to collect, these things that I've wanted to own are no longer becoming obtainable, and this is bad. The reality is, it's unfortunate that you didn't have a chance to buy it. Part of the reality is that you've actually had 20 plus years to buy, depending on what it is, right? You've had 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, what have you, right? There's a range for collecting for everyone. Sometimes it sucks, right? This is why, again, when we revisit the question of what do we do now, it's important to remember that you can't really dwell on these things. It's unfortunate, right? Most of us think back to, I'm sure most of us have memories, right? When we hear the news about first edition booster boxes going crazy, a lot of us have memories of, well, in 1999, I was a card store, these booster packs, I could have bought them and my parents didn't let me, right? We could have, like, you can't, these are things that you can't dwell on. I think people dwell a little bit too heavily on these, right? These are all things that are in the past. We have to think about what do we do now and what can we do going forward to help us avoid some of these pitfalls that we have fallen into. It is unfortunate, right? But again, a lot of us, we've been there, and it's a matter of being able to identify these patterns, identify these trends, so that going forward, we can be able to properly inform ourselves, make the right decisions, and do what's best, so we're not feeling the same things that we're feeling now. Because, to be perfectly honest, right, these first edition, like a first edition base set Charizard, we're probably getting to a point where this is going to be out of the realm of accessibility for most people. That being said, to me, it felt like it was outside the realm of accessibility for most people before. If most people probably aren't in a position to spend $220,000 on a piece of cardboard, but were those people really in a position to spend like $50,000 on it where it was a year ago, right? That's the idea is kind of the same. So I understand why it's a hard pill to swallow, but again, you can't really dwell on the past. Again, with the nature of the market being as dynamic, as fast-paced as it is, you have to be thinking about what's next. And again, this is most people when you have stuff coming out of the woodwork, if you are really in the market for something like this, it will show up again. It is becoming rare, it's becoming hard to find, but given enough time, given enough people that are looking for these things, that are trying to buy these things, that are trying to sell these things, at some point you will be able to buy it again. It may be more than what you want to pay, but if you're concerned about being able to find something, there are very, very few things in the collectible world that are truly inaccessible in terms of you being unable to get them. Most of those things we're talking about, like extremely rare things that are like single digit or double digit quantities of these. Usually we're talking more like sports cards, comics, things are very, very old, things that which are dating far longer than Pokemon or Magic has. In the realm of collectibles, in the scope of collectibles, right, 25 years, 30 years that we usually associate with Magic, Pokemon, most TCGs, that's completely dwarfed by the longevity of sports cards, by how long some of these things have been in the game for, how old some like truly collectible items are. So that being said, the most common question next to what do we do now is when do I sell? And again, we see a lot of these things, right? A lot of priorities for people change, a lot of things shift. Life happens, right? This is not really a surprise. A lot of people who are avid Magic players, Pokemon players, sports cards collectors, comics collectors, they've slowly grown out of it. And what a lot of these companies are trying to do, and they do very successfully, is recapture kind of that nostalgia from that age group, right? For those of us, well, not for those of us, but in 2007, right, what was a big deal in 2007? Transformers. That was when Michael Bay, he started remaking the Transformer movies. That was really to capture the nostalgia from the 80s, right, with the original Transformers and trying to bring that group of people back, right? I definitely remember seeing cartoons of the original Transformers. I saw cartoons of Beast Wars, right? These are all things that were at the time, and to me, I remember seeing Transformers. It was a big deal. Was it the same? Was it like the same seeing live action? Absolutely not. But that didn't necessarily change my joy, my love for Transformers. It was still there. It was still cool. It was still something that I wanted to be a part of. And Transformers at the time did set record box office numbers. And again, those companies trying to recapture that nostalgia is why they're so successful. And again, these companies, trading cards, right? Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, right? Not really different. Sports cards, not really different. Sports cards have been kind of something that's existed in perpetuity, right? We've seen sports cards only continue to be more and more popular over time. Sports cards, the market is absolutely booming right now. I'm not trying to echo and sound like Gary Vee here, but for those of you who have listened to him, this is something that he's been a big he's been a big fan of. He said this months and months ago. He was already getting into sports cards, Pokemon cards a while back, and it was a big deal to him, and he was fully aware of the impact that these would have. For those of you, I've mentioned Gary Vee a few times. If you've never heard of him, he's like a motivational speaker. He's an entrepreneur. He's been a backer for Twitter. He's been a backer for Facebook. I would argue that he is someone who has a very, very good sense of things that you want to be putting your money into. And he's serious about this, right? He's not just someone who's talking about it and hyping it up. He's actually putting his money where his mouth is, and he's actually putting down big dollars on Pokemon cards, on sports cards. He's tweeted about this. He's talked about it on his videos. He's talked about this on Facebook, right? These are all things that he's talked about. He talks about it time and time and time again. And this is clearly showing that this is not a one-time thing. And as we mentioned, this is not something that is going to be slowing down. If anything, it's only speeding up. And one of the interviews I listened to recently, and he talks about, is that a lot of people seem to be associating this hype, this demand. A lot of people think that this is artificial, that he's really trying to he's doing like a pump and dump. He's really hyping this up so he can get ahead of it and then and dump his stuff when the numbers go up. And he makes it very clear that's not the case. Because one, he says that he doesn't sell anything. He buys these things because these things bring him joy. He likes the collectible aspect. He likes the sports. He's a fan of the teams that he buys cards for. He's a fan of Pokemon. He says it brings him joy, and that's why he's buying these things. And he says one of the things that he mentioned prophetically, even, right? This was a few months ago when I listened to this interview. I just listened to the interview now. The interview was done a few months ago. He had mentioned that the market is still in its infancy. Again, a few months ago, he said the market is only going to pick up. It's only going to accelerate when you have big money, when you have big names, when you have celebrities, when you have people with a real amount of money getting into the market and putting money into it and buying up these collectibles. And when these collectibles, when they have that level of visibility, when they have that level of attention, that's when it's going to explode. And as we've seen, right, this has come true. The market has absolutely exploded for Pokemon. For Magic, we've seen a lot of the incremental gains. For comics, right, comics are more popular than ever as people have more time at home to be able to pursue their hobbies, to be able to do things like read comics, right? These are things that in most of our fast-paced lives a year ago, we wouldn't have even been able to consider doing. But now, right, people are buying comic books again. People are starting to read these comic books again because it brings them joy. And that's, again, fundamentally, that's why collectibles will always, always, always do well, because people know that you have the nostalgia, you have the art, you have the coolness factor of it, but fundamentally, people will buy these because it brings them joy, because there's some emotional part to it that has more value than whatever the item is worth in itself. And that's why collectibles have had the longevity that they've had. So usually the next question people start asking is, when do I sell? Right? And this is a tough thing to answer, because a lot of people, they've realized that, well, some of these collectibles, they may just not be for me anymore. I don't have time to play. Maybe I'm happy with the money I've made. I bought this with the purchase. I made this purchase with the intent of selling down the line. And maybe I'm happy with the number I'm at. Right? Maybe I'm ready to move on to something else. Maybe I want to be financing something else. Maybe I want to use the gains from these purchases to maybe start looking at another investment, maybe looking at the next thing, right? Sometimes it's a simple matter of, hey, real life sets in. I want to be buying a house. I want to be buying an engagement ring for my to-be fiance, right? For my significant other, what have you. These are all things that people do consider. And when it comes to when do I sell, usually collectibles go first. And usually when people ask, when do I sell, this is the philosophy that I follow. Again, this is what works for me. What you want to do, maybe something completely different. a lot of this, there's a lot of mitigating factors that you have to consider. But for me, when I sell, is you have to be able to understand what realized gains are. And this is very different than unrealized gains, which is what most people think of when they realize that they're making money. So a realized gain is very simple. A realized gain is whatever profit you see from something that you sell. Until you actually sell that physical item, it is an unrealized gain. You can refer to us as a paper profit, right? Like this is something that is made up. This is imaginary. In theory, you have made money, but until you have recuperated your money and you've sold that item, until you've sold that stock, that bond, that investment, right? It's an unrealized gain. It doesn't matter how much this item that I have, right? This piece of cardboard that I have in my hand here, it doesn't matter how much it goes up. It doesn't matter if this goes up 200%, 400%, 1000%. If I still have this piece of cardboard, it's costed me, it's worth as much as what it cost me. Until I sell this, until I get someone to pay for what I think it's worth, I haven't made a realized gain yet. As it sits there on top of the million other cards I have on my desk, it's just an unrealized gain. It's something that it cost me some amount of money to acquire it, and it's just sitting there until I sell, until I have money in my hand. It's not a realized gain. And a lot of people seem to confuse the two for whatever reason. A lot of people seem to think that, well, my collection is worth X amount of dollars. Well, that's great, but it's hypothetically worth X amount of dollars. Until you actually get the X amount of dollars, you haven't realized a single gain yet. You haven't realized a single penny of profit. All it is just sitting there and hypothetically being worth this much money. So those are some things to consider when people are actually selling. A lot of people, again, don't consider the fees, the work that actually goes into selling. Your collection that's worth $1,000, for example, when you start trying to sell it, when you actually have to piece it out, if you're going to sell in one go, right? A lot of people always ask, how do I sell my collection? Well, the first question I shoot back at them is, it's very simple. Do you want this to be painless, or do you want this to be profitable? Right? This is a one of two. This isn't like you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Most people seem to realize that you pick one, but you can't have both. If you want it to be painless, right, then it's simple. Then you just walk into a store, you walk to a vendor like me, you walk to, or not walk to, but you go online to Card Kingdom, you go online to Channel Fireball, you find these people that have buy lists, and they'll just buy it from you. And in theory, you just send in everything, you just type in all your cards, you send in a collection tracker or something, you send it to someone, and they'll say, I'll offer you X dollars. That's painless. Right, that's like in theory. Some people, like in the case of like Channel Fireball, you don't have to do anything. You literally send them an entire box, and they will just sort it and give you a price and tell you, hey, we're going to pay you this much money on it. The reality is, though, is that profitable, right? Are you going to be doing well with that? And the answer most likely is going to be no, because someone else is doing the work, right? So after they buy that collection, they're going to have to grade it, they're going to have to list it, they're going to have to be able to sell it, they're going to have to ship it. Right, so whatever each of those convenience factors that you're taking out, each one of those things that they're doing that you're not, is going to be cutting into your profitability and on your return on your collection. If you want to be profitable, right, that's pretty simple. You sell it yourself, right? You cut out the middleman. Why let myself? Why let Channel Fireball? Why let Card Kingdom? Why let another vendor make the profit when you can just do it yourself? So of course, there's work involved. And again, most people don't seem to realize that when you're selling something, when someone else is selling something for you, they're taking a cut. Right? A lot of people seem to think, oh, I'll just make a TCG player store and sell things myself. Well, for the people who've never done this before, right, I see this all the time. Right? There's people in TCG player who honestly have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what costs, what grading cards entails, what it means to ship. Right, when you start selling stuff, you have to go and buy. You have to buy envelopes. You have to buy bubble mailers. You have to buy something. You have to have a printer. Right? Do most people have printers in their home even anymore? With like most people just do everything is so digital now, right? Why have paper anything anymore? These are all costs that people aren't aware of when they're selling. Right, and then if you list to TCG player, all of a sudden you're paying fees now. You're paying anywhere. You're paying roughly 15%, give or take, just kind of a 15% across the board in fees for every transaction you sell. Right? If you're selling $10, right, it's going to be about $1.50 out and then $8.50 back to you. If you have free shipping, right, you're paying another 80 cents or so give or take on supplies, right? And people in order to ship, right, you need things like top loaders, envelopes, stamps, paper, sleeves, etc., etc. The list goes on, right? These are all costs that come with selling. So when people say, when do I sell? Again, the first question is, do you want to be profitable or do you want it to be painless? That's the first question that people have to answer. Sometimes they don't care. Maybe they're just ready to take a lump sum of money, have someone else do the work for them because they're happy with whatever they made on it. Maybe their $1,000 collection were things that they spent less than $100 on. So even if they only get 50%, even if they only get $500, they're happy making $400 on something that they may never see themselves using again. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think there's very valid reasons for both. As the collection values get higher, as you're talking about things that are becoming more valuable, more expensive, things that are becoming more rare, you take a smaller hit because it's harder for stores to restock these things. It's harder for people to keep these things in stock because once things sell out, it's when the next time you're restocking it, you're obviously going to sell for more, right? If you sold out of a $10 item, you're not going to restock it at $10. You're going to restock it at $12. As a result, you have to pay more. And for things that are going up, we've seen this in the markets again and again. For things that are going up, there's more demand for people to be buying it. You're competing with other people who won't be buying it. So it gets harder and harder to restock. So again, if we're examining the question, when do I sell? There's no good, hard, fast answers for this. I think for me, usually when people ask, when do I sell? Being in the nature of owning a business, right? Cash flow is king. Cash is king, cash flow is king. These are things that maybe most people don't necessarily relate to if they don't own a business, but keeping the money flowing is important in a business. You want to stay ahead of the curve. You want to be always have access to money, right? You have bills to pay, you have employees to pay, you have overhead to pay, you have collections to buy. These are all things that will take money away from you, and you have to be able to balance that out with when you sell. And selling, for the most part, as if you operate as a business, you should be buying things for less than you sell, I would hope. Otherwise, you should probably talk to me. You may have problems with your business. Just again, very generic things. Like I say this jokingly, but there are a surprising amount of businesses. I've seen this time and time again with a lot of retailers, with a lot of small businesses. They don't properly manage their cash flow. They aren't spending their money in a way that is efficient, in a way that's smart, in a way where they're getting the most money, they're getting the most bang for their buck, right? Just looking at it on a very simplistic level. I see this in all levels of people. People ask me, what should I be spending my money on? Where should I be investing? And again, these people, they're not doing the things that will maximize the value of their money. Part of this is knowing when to sell. And again, for me, when I sell, I will always sell something if I know I paid on it. And for the most part, again, I don't necessarily care. I've definitely sold things at losses before. This is the nature of kind of sunk costs, right? Sometimes you have to take an L. That's the reality of the situation. It's unfortunate. Not everything pays off. That is just kind of the reality of investing. That's the reality of what we do. Not everything pays off. Not everything sees gains. I'm no prophet, right? I have to make my best educated guess on what I think will happen going forward. Sometimes taking an L, it's okay. You have to accept, cut your losses, sell it, recuperate whatever money you can, just move on. I'm okay breaking even on things. Breaking even, if it all cost me was my time and my labor, it's unfortunate. I would prefer to not be doing pointless things with my time. But again, sometimes with breaking even, it's better to break even than potentially face a loss in the future. Overall, as a business, when I sell, if overall things are profitable, I'm happy. And I think this is one of the things that most businesses haven't really embraced yet. And I think, again, this is kind of a hard pill to swallow. Same idea goes to investing. Same idea goes into buying cards, buying any sort of investment. Sometimes breaking even counts as a win. Overall, if you are ahead, that's a win. If you have 10 things you're invested in, for example, 10 different cards, right? You have 10 different cards, a portfolio of 10 different cards. If 6 of them pay off and 4 of them don't, I think that's a win. right? You're coming out ahead more often than you're falling behind. And again, there's so much speculation, there's so much uncertainty in this that it's hard to be able to definitively say, man, I won time and time and time again. And I think being okay with breaking even is something that will ultimately help you in the long run. I think a it will be a healthy thing to come to terms with. And I think if more businesses came to terms with this, and more people came to terms with this when they're trying to invest or trying to park their money, this is something that will help them in the long term. I'm always for selling. Again, for the most part, I don't necessarily need to make money on every single transaction I do. I think I have enough things that were more than profitable by a very, very large margin. I've done very well on a lot of things. So a lot of the things that I've done very well on, again, it helps balance out some of the things that do count as losses, which is unfortunate. It's regretful, but the takeaway is that I have to avoid things. The goal is to avoid those things in the future, to be able to prevent myself from making those wrong decisions again in the future. So again, if we look at the question, when do I sell? That's a really tough one. I think for most people, my advice would be take a look at your personal finances, take a look at where you are in life, take a look at the reality of things. And if you think that money is better served elsewhere, that should probably be your first indicator that it's time to sell. I don't think there's any shame in it. I think it's perfectly fine to say that, you know, these cards, these Magic cards I own, these Pokemon cards I own, these comics, right? It just doesn't do it for me anymore. And I think that's perfectly fine. People leave their collectibles, people leave the game for all different reasons. And I think that's perfectly fine. If you have realized gains, if you've already sold things, excuse me, and you're happy with the money you've made, that's perfectly serviceable. That's a win, right? If you come out ahead overall on your collection, if what you own brought you joy at some point, if you enjoyed the games of Magic you played, you enjoyed your Pokemon collection, being able to look at them and being able to have the journey and trip over the years, right? That's a win, right? And at the end of it, you have some amount of money to show for it. That being said, there's something that people do feel, right? It's kind of opposite of buyer's remorse. This is people sell off things that they do regret in the future. This is why I say when people do this, think long and hard about what the money means to you. If you're looking at if it is something that affects your life in a meaningful way, right? Again, if you're trying to buy a new car, if you're looking to put a down payment on a house, if you're looking for an engagement ring, right? These are all lifestone metrics that I think are vastly more important than owning some amount of cardboard. I think that those things will provide more value to your life than any amount of cardboard will. There's an upper limit to how many times you can look at your Magic collection. There's upper time to how many times you can read a comic book, right? These are all things that, while they do bring you joy, I think there's upper limit to how much joy they can bring you versus how much some of the real life matters will impact you. And again, when people come to me and people say like, man, I don't know if I should be selling this, my answer to tell people is, what will you do with the money? If you will do with the money and do something meaningful with it, right? Even if it comes down to something as simple as paying rent. If your choice comes down to you can keep your Magic cards or you can have a place to live for a month, right? Most people, I would assume it would be as clear cut as, you're right, I'll sell these cards. It sucks. I don't really want to get rid of them, but I need a place to live, right? Paying rent is more important than this pile of cardboard. And this is starting to seem like very philosophical, but as a retailer, as someone who's been in the business for quite some time, this is something I experience time and time again. I hear this all the time. With the pandemic, it's become a little bit rough. I've seen more people that are trying to sell their collections or trying to sell to pay for things. It's kind of starting towards the end of the month when, the third week rolls around, fourth week rolls around, people are starting to realize that, man, rent is going to be due in a few days. I need to start selling stuff to pay for it. So it's a hard question to answer. When do I sell? At the end of the day, I think it means different things to different people. Again, most people, they're happy if they come out ahead, and I think that is just kind of the most generic answer. If you have come out ahead and the money is going to mean for you in your life than some amount of cardboard or some amount of paper will, then I think selling is pretty easy. You just have to be able to determine, do I want to be profitable or do I want to be painless? And that really comes down to the individual. Some people, they value their time. Some people can't afford to be listing things on TCG Player and doing all the shipping. And they just don't want to sit there and deal with people all day on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on all these media channels, what have you. I think that's perfectly fine. I think most people, again, where they are in life, what the money means to them, what their time is valued at, these all mean different things to different people. And I don't think there's a right way and there's a wrong way, because, again, things mean different things to different people. So when answering the question, when do I sell, you have to do what works best for you. So moving onwards to kind of round out what we're going to talk about today, right? Going back to the question of what do we do now? There are two concepts that are pretty important. The first concept is price memory, or also referred to as memory of price, right? This is a fairly simple concept. Price memory and memory of price is looking back and using the past price on an item as a determinant for what that price will be at right now and what that price will be at in the future. So what is an example of this, right? When we think about a card, right, let's use a fairly generic Magic card, Tarmogoyf, right? For most of us who've been playing Magic for a while, Tarmogoyf is kind of your like marquee green creature as a staple for a very long time. For those of you who don't remember, this card was probably like $200 at one point. This is kind of the beginning of Modern. This was when this card was really the best creature in Modern. This was when really a kind of a different era in Magic. This was before we started seeing reprints. So you have to remember that when Modern came out is 2011. The first Modern Masters, the first reprinting of Tarmogoyf, wasn't until 2013. So there's a pretty big gap in that period. And in that time, Tarmogoyf had a lot of time to go up in price. And even with the reprint, it didn't actually go down in price. It actually stayed pretty stable in price. It actually went up in price because Modern Masters had the effect of getting more people into Modern. More people are interested in Modern. Now, when people are starting to open packs and starting getting pieces together for Modern, well, what happens when you own one Tarmogoyf? Well, if you're trying to build Jund, for example, right, one of the decks that Tarmogoyf played in, one Tarmogoyf isn't going to cut. You're going to need to buy 3 more Tarmogoyfs. Or you can sell your Tarmogoyf, but most people, being Magic players, they want to buy 3 more Tarmogoyfs to build their deck. So this actually caused the price to go up. We've seen this since then. It's been reprinted a few more times. It has been reprinted in Modern Masters 2. It was reprinted in Ultimate Masters. It was a box topper in Ultimate Masters. And even now, today, in 2020, Modern is kind of fallen by the wayside. It's kind of fallen out of favor. Pioneer seems to be kind of the most recent thing. Prior to March, where everything was shut down, Pioneer really started to seem like it was taking off. Tarmogoyf has kind of fallen out of favor in Modern. Cards like Fatal Push, the meta changing has really kind of pushed Tarmogoyf to the side. It's no longer that monster that was in 2011, kind of the beginning of Modern. And with multiple reprints now, right, again, not just Modern Masters 1, the original reprinting, but we have Modern Masters 2, we have Ultimate Masters. There's multiple ways to get Tarmogoyf now. But Tarmogoyf has, even though it's lost a lot of value, even though it's no longer $200, right, we're still looking at a $40 card. I see most Tarmogoyfs kind of in the $40 range. Still $40, it's stayed stagnant at $40. It's been basically that price since Ultimate Masters was printed. And Ultimate Masters, and even before it was being reprinted, it was basically that same price. It was a little bit more expensive, but not by much. And again, this goes to just show that price memory is a powerful thing. People remember a point when I had paid $200 for my Tarmogoyf, I paid $800 for my playset, and people aren't really wanting to let it go for anything less if they don't have to. Again, this is one of the things that price memory affects very strongly. I think price memory is one of those things that people probably use as a cognitive bias in one form. People are starting to think that this card was worth X dollars then. There's no real reason for it to be worth less money now. A lot of things are influenced by this. And as this is very, very prevalent in the collector's market, especially we see things, we associate things, well, this had a price at one point. There's no real reason for it to be worth substantially less than that, right? No one complains if the price goes up. If the price goes up, it's like, oh, it makes sense because collectible things happened. But if the price goes down, there's a lot of upward pressure. There's a lot of pressure against the price just completely creating in value because people remember it used to be worth X dollars at one point, and it's hard. There's a lot of resistance against it falling dramatically in value. That being said, one of the concepts in investing, concepts in economics we have to understand is there's such thing called a double top and a double bottom. And usually what this means is that when things are, if we look at a price graph on things, it can be anything. It can be a stock, it can be a card price, it can be anything. When we see things hit a top, when we see things hit a market high, and then they hit a market high again, people refer to us as a double top. The inverse is true when things drop in price, and then they drop in price again. We refer to that as a double bottom. Usually what that means is it's usually indicative of an incoming inflection point. A double top means that because this price has gone up twice in a very short period of time, we're looking at symptoms kind of indicating a bubble. And then once when we have a double bottom, right, we see something has bottomed out in price and then continue to bottom out in price. And then people may take that as an indicator of this is time to buy. So example of some double tops, right? We look at something like cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin 2018, we had seen this double top, right? It was peaking and then it peaked again in a relatively short period of time. Again, largely indicative of a bubble, not always. And then after it reached that second high, it couldn't actually go any higher. It couldn't actually sustain that price, started to recline in value. When we look at double bottoms, right, things that indicate it's time to buy, right? We can usually associate these with a lot of magic reprints. Usually when things first come out, we can kind of see this on release weekend as well. We know that leading up to pre-release weekend, prices are decreasing, and this is a simple matter of more supplies entering the market. There's more access for people to buy these cards. When pre-releases, when cards are first spoiled, when pre-releases first drop, cards are pretty high, supply is constricted, there's not a lot of copies on the market. So leading up to release date, we see more copies entering the market. That kind of causes a low. That's the first bottom, as it were. And then release weekend, we have a huge surge entering the market. Again, that's really due to supply increasing, but the concept doesn't really change here. You get to a point when there's so much supply entering the market, the prices have to go down again. We see a new low. And then what happens? The price usually rebounds. We have people that are waiting for a low, that were waiting for a price to drop, waiting for enough supply to enter the market, and people start buying, and the price starts going up, right? And then these two concepts, double top, double bottom, when we look at price charts, these are things that are relatively well documented in economics on the stock market, on the stock market, and we can see this. We can see this with a lot of stocks. Generally, most stocks, even just the market as a whole, looking at the NASDAQ, looking at the Dow Jones, looking at S&P 500, we rarely see periods where we can definitely point out trends where we see two tops where we have a record-setting high, and then we have another record-setting high, and then the price usually goes down, or the flip is true when things bottom out. Usually this happens towards the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of people had bet against the airline industry. A lot of people were concerned that, right, with the huge dip in travel, with the huge dip in demand for people to fly, because everything was shut down, the airlines would suffer huge problems, which they did, right? We saw some of the lowest lows we've seen in the airline industry with Delta stock, with American stock, with United stock, right? With a lot of these travel-centric companies with airlines, those big three, their stocks were hit especially hard. I know a lot of people that were buying Delta stock, they waited for a low, and then they waited for a second low, and then that was indicated that it was time to buy. And usually, naturally, due to so many people trying to buy at the exact same time, the stock started to stabilize and it started to go up. So these are two things that are worth remembering. It's hard to say what a top looks like. It's hard to say what a bottom looks like because it's all reflective, right? We can't see this until we're on the other side. That's really, again, this is due to this speculative nature of the market, right? I'm no prophet. So you have to look at these charts and you have to see, Are we at our high right now? Are we going to start seeing a decline in prices? Are these things already going to be at their bottom? Are these reprints at their bottom? Are these cards going to get any cheaper than they already are? Is this now a good time to buy? And that's really, that's kind of the nature of investing. That's the fundamental core of the collectible industry, right? Of things are scarce, things have value. So trying to buy them at the right time is really going to be what makes or breaks your bank, right? No one wants to be riding kind of at the high and then buying at the near the top, especially if we're at the double top, especially if we're going to start seeing prices tumble a little bit. But again, everyone wants to be kind of riding at the bottom at the double low and then buying it before it starts going up. Right, but there are a lot of things, there's a lot of mitigating factors to consider. Sometimes if you're buying at the first peak and it goes up again, you may not have made as much as someone who bought early on, but you're still winning by a small amount, right? The inverse completely true as well. Sometimes buying things a little bit earlier and just guaranteeing you being able to buy it is sometimes better than just waiting and trying to be a little bit too greedy and waiting for another bottom and then the price goes up again. Right, sometimes it's usually better to be on the receiving end and then buying it before it goes up than waiting for it to go up and trying to buy it when you're on the uphill journey. So again, when we think about these concepts, this all relates back to what do we do now? And so really when we're buying, right, because of price memory, because of the way things work, is my advice is to not stress. Right, a lot of people that do feel this sense of FOMO, the sense of, man, I'm just missing on things that I could be buying. My advice is generically, you want to be buying into the next thing. You can't be thinking about, man, I missed my chance to buy first edition base packs. If I bought them at the beginning of the year, I would have made a killing now. Or like these things that are already expensive. You can't be thinking about that anymore, right? Because you don't want to be the guy that's buying if we're close to that double top already. Right, prices are doing nothing but up, but we don't know how high the up is going to go. We could be nearing the peak, and if we're nearing the peak, we're not getting as much money. We're not getting as much return on our money as we should. Right. So what are we looking for? We're looking for things that have yet to peak, or potentially we're looking for things that are at their bottom. So things that would be at the bottom is maybe standard products. Things are very recent, very, very new. Right. Things are happening right now, and sure, you're going to be holding on to them for a while, but maybe these things haven't peaked yet. Maybe these things aren't there yet. We don't know, right? A lot of people are thinking that Champions Fate is going to be a big deal. It's very possible if you buy right now, we don't see a lot more supply hit the market. These will do very well. People who bought Hidden Fates a year ago, people are doing incredibly well with Hidden Fates. The singles are all up, the packs are up, the tins are up, everything is up for Hidden Fates. Right, people who bought reserve lists like prior to being a pandemic, they're seeing all kinds of returns on their cards. Dual lands, power, right? Not just the big things, but the small things as well. When we're talking about things like Akami Rector, kind of the Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy, Urza's Destiny cards, right? These are all things that have done very well. So it's always a matter of, you don't have to necessarily be buying the blue chip. You don't necessarily have to be buying the best thing because, again, unless you have the money to do so, the best thing is probably already taken by someone else. Someone else is already taking care of the best thing, right? So all you can do for your portfolio, all you can do for your wallet is to think about what is the next best thing. And for right now, if we're talking about Magic, what do I think the next best thing is? I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not completely sure. Again, I've mentioned a few times in the past, my confidence in Magic and their IP is being a little shaken right now. I'm not as high on Magic as I was a few years ago. Magic, again, this is not me knocking Magic. Magic is still on the up and up. Reserve list cards are still doing well across the board. We see power going up. We see duels going up. We see low to mid-tier reserve list cards going up. The only cards that aren't doing super well reserve list wise are the garbage ones. And those are usually artificially manipulated. That's why they don't have any sort of longevity to them. But if you're still buying dual lands, I suspect that this price boom for dual lands, for power, is not over yet. And I think that a lot of people who are buying these cards will do very well. What's the next best thing in Pokemon? Pokemon is something I'm much more high on. I think there's a lot more momentum behind it. There's a lot more things pushing it up and forward, which is really where you want to be. Right, Magic, we're kind of stagnant. Right, we're kind of stagnant to steady. Right, that's not what we're looking for when we're investing. If if you're tolerant of risk, if you are willing to stomach a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty, right? Pokemon's the way to go, because again, everything is so uncertain. We don't know what things are going to look like in the next month, in the next quarter, in the next year. I think if you're willing to stomach a lot of risk and you're willing to ride that wave, it could potentially do very well for you. I think the next best thing in Pokemon is to not be looking at super vintage stuff. Right? We're already at the point where WotC era boxes, right? You're basically paying like $10,000 for most WotC era boxes, right? That's kind of the nature of it, right? Base set. A month ago, right? It was less than a month ago when, towards the beginning of when I was doing this, right? We had an interview. Charlie Herlocker was on, and we had him talking. And the morning that I did the interview with Charlie, we had talked. One of the things we talked about was Heritage Auction. That was the record-setting base set booster bust, right? $198,000. We know now that box went to Logan Paul. He sold the packs out of that box for $11,111. Right, so retail in that box would be 50% higher than what he paid for on the box already. Now I know that if you look on Facebook, if you follow a lot of the groups, there's people out there who are trying to spend $200,000+ on a box, just public offers outright saying I want to spend $200,000 on a box, and these people aren't getting bites. Most offers are north of $300,000 now. That's 50% more than what we saw a month ago. And this is people catching on. So if you have that kind of money to drop, then more power to you. Change the market in whatever way makes sense to you. But for most of us, we have to start thinking about the next best thing. And my advice is, again, stop thinking about WotC era boxes. If you just don't think about them anymore, they're probably not worth the time. You're probably not going to see the same return. What you want to be thinking about is you want to be thinking about maybe modern era boxes, things that have yet to pop. What I mean by this is I like XY boxes. XY boxes, I think, are in the era where it happened right before Pokemon Go. This was before the mass printing of boxes. But even so, even with the mass printing of boxes, we have seen some boxes get very expensive. XY Evolution boxes recently popped. I think that popped yesterday. A lot of people were saying, man, I just like the case of Evolutions I had on eBay, on TCG Player, just sold. And now that there's a new floor on them, and these prices are just creeping upwards. So XY, I think as a whole, I think that whole generation is a good place to park your money, mainly because those boxes haven't popped yet. We've already seen Flash Fires. This happened before, but now it's really starting to catch up again. Flash Fires, it has that Charizard in it. We know that Charizard sets to do very well. Flash Fire boxes, when I looked on eBay, you can't find a Flash Fire box. You can buy 36 loose packs, which come in blisters, so we know that they're unweighed. Not that modern packs can really be weighed anyways, but we know that these 36 blister packs of Flash Fires, see for like $1,000. I see a sealed booster box of Flash Fires for $2,000. Right, we're talking a set that 4 years ago you could buy us in your store for $80. Right, these are returns that I think, this is what I mean when I say the next best thing, because these prices aren't going down. I don't see any reason for there to be downward pressure on these boxes, because the supply simply isn't there. There's not enough of these on the market. There's not enough of these available for people to go and buy. If you want to go on and say, I want to buy a case of XY, no matter what set, for the most part, you're going to be buying a bunch of loose boxes. If you want a sealed case, good luck finding someone that has a sealed case that's not already been broken to sell out the original boxes, or you're going to be paying through the roof. You're going to be paying more than 6 times the price on an individual box. So that's kind of what I think about next investing in Pokemon. There's just so much out there. No matter what you're choosing, no matter if Magic is what you want to be buying, if Pokemon is what you want to be buying, do your research. When we think about the next best thing in sports cards, you always have to be keeping up with what's going on in the world of sports. Currently, the NBA championships happened this past weekend. Huge surge in a lot of the LA Lakers cards, like Kobe Bryant cards, have done well. They kind of popped with his passing earlier this year, but LA Lakers cards, LeBron James, right? Like his cards guaranteed to go up. This is something I mentioned before. These cards will go up. Right now, the World Series is going on. We are, I think, like 5 days. Today's the 15th. I think we're 5 days away from the World Series happening. There's World Series is always good. Baseball cards always do well. One of the things that I keep my eye on, again, I love baseball. Baseball is a very stats-oriented, very numbers-oriented game. The Tampa Bay Rays I believe they've only ever played in one World Series. They have no World Series titles. If and for whatever reason, if they somehow manage to spike and win the World Series like the Nationals did this year, there are definitely players that will definitely pop. You won't be looking at and going out and buying their rookie cards, right? Again, this does require knowledge of baseball. You do have to be aware of the team. You have to have the know-how to go out and buy these cards, buy their rookie cards, buy their signature cards or whatever. It does require a bit of knowledge, but if you bet right, and and they win or whatever, right? It's gonna be a record-setting year for them. We saw this with the Washington Nationals last year. A lot of Washington Nationals players' cards broke. Juan Soto, he was really the heavy hitter. He really did a bulk of the work. I mentioned him a few times before. His rookie cards have just completely exploded in value. And I think that really this year for the World Series, given the nature of this year, given how complicated this year has been in the world of sports, I think if you're willing to make that gamble, if you're willing to do a bit of research, do a bit, have a bit of risk tolerance, right, and being able to go out and make that gamble, bet on some of these players, it's possible that there could be a payday for you in 2 weeks when the World Series determines and Tampa Bay wins. Is it a long shot? Absolutely, right? We're still, we're not the World Series yet. There's still games being played to determine pendants. So that's a little ways away, right? But I think 5 days, I think all the games will have been played. We'll know who is in the World Series, who will make that bet. I think there's a lot of money to be made there. So I think, again, right, this is a very brief, I spent like maybe 10 minutes or so talking about all these ideas, about all these next best things, right? Again, I do want to reemphasize that I'm not a prophet. I have no way of knowing if any of these are going to pan out. These are things that I would be doing. I'm not worth millions of dollars. I don't just have a bunch of liquid assets that I can go on freely speculate. But these are things that I think if I was in a position to park my money and I had some confidence in the market, in some of these markets, right? If I have confidence, Magic and Pokemon, sports cards, what have you, whatever your knowledge base is, whatever your skill set is, this is where I want to be going. Right now, I do think Pokemon is still kind of on that high. I know I've been high on Pokemon a lot. I know a lot of people are high on Pokemon. There's been a lot of buzz in the Facebook groups I'm in, the social media groups I'm in. A lot of people have brought a lot of attention to the Logic buying the $220,000 Charizard card, right? Logan Paul buying the base set booster box first edition, right? So there's been a lot of buzz about it. It's becoming more and more accepted by more and more people. A lot more people are on top of this now. A lot of people are starting to ask, what does this do to the collectible market as a whole? And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and this is something that I stand firmly by, more eyes on something, more money entering the market is not bad for the market. It is something that benefits all of us, right? This is solidly in the mantra of rising tide raises all ships. Right? More money entering is good for all of us on every level. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a player. It doesn't matter if you're a collector, if you're an investor, if you're a retail owner, if you're looking at this very casually. This is something that will benefit you individually in the long run. There's incentive, there's reason for these companies to put out better products, right? Which is good for you if you're a player. As for a collector, right, you get more things, more cool things, right? We've seen more and more Charizard cards. I know Pokemon knows this. There's no shortage of Charizard collectors out there. People like the card Charizard. That's why it has that sense of royalty. It has that name associated with it. When people go out and spend money on a Charizard card, they know that they're getting something that is collectible, that is cool. It has clearly throwbacks to the base set Charizard, right? We all know what's happening with that price. And I'm sure, again, it's going to be really interesting. In a few days here, we're going to have the auctions go up for PWCC. We're going to be able to see what is being offered on this lot for this month. In terms of Pokemon, we looked at last month. We looked at how a lot of the cards set new highs, right? And then this month, we're going to do it again. We're going to see how the market changes. And we can see this over the course of 1 month. It's only been 2 weeks since the last batch of Pokemon cards. We saw a lot of really, really insane numbers there. We've talked about it a few times, and then this is something that I'll review again. And again, the next best thing is really where you want to be looking at right now. Don't be focusing on what's already passed, what's done in the past. If you can't afford that first edition base set Charizard, it's unfortunate. It's reality of things. You have to move on. You have to think about what can I be buying next? Where do I want to put my money next? That makes the most sense to me. That can potentially avoid putting me in that pitfall where being in this position in a year from now even, and just thinking, man, I wish I had pulled the trigger on that card a year ago. Why didn't I? And now that card is also unobtainable to me. That being said, it is important to remember, I do not want to cause FOMO. I'm not trying to encourage people to go and just like spend every last penny they have investing and trying to buy these things and hope that something works out for them. FOMO is one of the things I've advocated very strongly against on this channel. You have to be able to think rationally. You have to be able to do what works best for you with the knowledge and the skill set you have. A lot of people act brashly. They listen to me. They listen to other content creators on YouTube. And that's really the nature of where we are right now. People seem to think that because these content creators are always going to be right about everything. I'm the first person, probably not the first person, but I'm one of many people to wholly admit that I don't know everything. I have a very specific skill set. I buy things, I invest in things that I know, that I'm confident on. And again, even things that I know and I'm confident on, it doesn't always pay out. That is the reality of investing. Sometimes you will take a loss. There's no investor out there, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how many surefire bets you've made, the next bet you make could be a losing bet. So you do have to take it all with a grain of salt. I do think understanding the concept of what is the next best thing is going to solidly be the answer to what do we do now. And what do we do now is something that, again, is going to be different for every person. Not every person is going to act in the same way. Not every person has the means to act in the same way, to buy in the same way, to invest in the same way. So do your research. If you like some of the things that I've said here, do your research. Do not take what I have to say with a grain of salt. Go out, look at the data. We've had a different episode where we talked about data, where we talked about how to interpret data meaningfully. Use that data, make your best decision, make the best decision that works for you. You have to be able to justify your decision, because at the end of the day, money talks. If you buy something that is a losing bet, at the end of the day, that's on you. And you have to be able to own that decision. It feels good when whatever bet you make turns out to be a winner, right? And it pays off. But if you make a bet, if you make an investment, it turns out to be a loss, that's the reality situation. Sometimes you're just going to have to take the losses. So what do we do now? Think about the next best thing. Think about how you can stretch your dollar. Do your research. Think about, if I'm going to buy the next best thing, does it make sense as the next best thing? And if it doesn't make sense, is this level of risk I'm willing to tolerate? Am I okay with this level of risk betting on the Tampa Bay Rays, for example? Maybe it is. Maybe you're willing to take that level of risk. Maybe you have the no, and you're willing to take that bet. More power to you. So with that said, that will wrap up today's episode. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Thank you all for listening. I hope this information was helpful to you all. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, and we'll be back here tomorrow with another episode. Thanks again for listening.